Hey everyone, welcome to Mythmaker Book Reviews. I've been reading a lot lately, and with the new year, I thought I would start sharing some of those books that I've been reading with all of you. We're going to start off with The Hobbit. It's a really great book to get started on, and I highly recommend it. It's a 10 out of 10 for the book, and for all you audiobook listeners, I would say it's maybe a 8 out of 10. I just think that for the most part, reading this book allows for a lot more of that imagination, and one of the strong suits of it is the imagination that you create your own world in. I will say though that you should avoid the BBC rendition or reading of this book. For all you audiobook listeners, that one was pretty difficult to understand, and I would give that one maybe a 5 out of 10. Sorry, BBC. So with that introduction out of the way, let's jump into this video. Part 1 is why the rating. I think that this book really is attractive to multiple audiences. I've read it as an adult, and my girlfriend read it as a kid, and both of us really loved this book and the way that it told the story. It tells really good morals about family and friends, and it really biases the story towards a general storytelling with a lot of interesting things that happen so that you can fill in the gaps with your imagination. And I think that's one of its strong suits. I really liked listening to this fantastical journey that feels realistic enough that it could have been true in our distant past. And I think that's the kind of story I really enjoyed as a kid. I'll touch on some of the downfalls later of having a writing like that, but for the most part, it depends on the story. And this story benefits from that style of writing. And I really like J.R.R Tolkien's style of building up a world slowly but surely so that you feel engrossed in what's happening. Welcome to part 2, which is the characters and the key events that happen in this book. Spoiler warning, you've been warned. The story centers around Bilbo, Gandalf the Wizard, and Thorin, which is the leader of a group of dwarves. Now, the general plot of the story, very high level, is that they meet Bilbo Baggins, they all get together, and then they get this quest by Gandalf and Thorin, who wants to reclaim his old family castle in the mountains and reclaim his throne. So they set off on this journey. Bilbo's a little scared to go, and he doesn't want to at first. And that's why I feel like it opens up a lot for character growth, and it helps for kids. You're scared of doing a lot of things, and it kind of shows that it's okay to start from a place of fear, start from a place of uncertainty, but the important thing is to overcome that and be courageous and go out on these journeys to have these experiences. And then it's completely normal to be afraid sometimes. So then they go out and they immediately encounter some trolls, which they are able to overcome with some wit. And it's the first time Bilbo actually has an opportunity to kind of showcase something that he's good at, or showcase that he can overcome his fear. Most people will be afraid of it, but he's put in a situation where he has to deal with these trolls. And then they tie in the trolls to the goblins. Basically, they find and get something from their interaction from the trolls, and when they find these goblins in the mountain pass, the goblins are immediately enemies because they see what they are carrying. And I really like how he does this. Every scene kind of ties back to the scene prior, and it adds to some flow. I feel like if you have a bunch of distinct settings and distinct story elements without something to tie it together, you can feel like it's a little choppy. They get through an element where they meet the elves later on in this really difficult forest, and I like how the environment is also a challenge, not just monsters. I feel like a lot of fantasy books will rely way too heavily on monsters and creatures as the enemy, rather than the difficulty of passing through like a magical forest. I highly recommend that you balance it out when you write your own books. Then we encounter Gollum, who's like a side quest. He's the only person who doesn't really tie into the previous story plots, but will have an effect on later story plots because that is where Bilbo gets the ring. Now this feels like a side quest, a B plot, some would say, where it's not pertinent to the main quest line, but it has implications on the later parts. And I think it's very important to include this because you want your reader to feel a little bit of novelty. You don't want it to just be one continuous train of thought. It's nice to break it up every once in a while, a very few amount of times, to show them this cool scene that you wanted to show that you may not feel like it fits in with the main plot. And that will also break up their thought process and their expectations of what's to come later, because now you're adding a new element that they weren't foreseeing. Finally, they get to the mountain where Thorin and his family treasures are. They find the dragon, and huge plot twist, someone else kills the dragon. And I think that's hilarious. Having an opportunity to have the big climax be them fighting this dragon and building it up to be like that, but then having him fall to some other person kind of makes you feel like it's not just a story. It's not just exposition, like build up, climax, then having like traditional ending where you just have like the winding down of the story afterwards. It felt like a plot twist where you're feeling that it's not just about these characters. This world is filled with many other players who do amazing things, and everything doesn't rely on the players or the people of the main characters being the center of every major deed that happens in the book. And after that, the actual main conflict happens between them and the people who actually ended up killing the dragon. And I felt like that was very interesting because then it became political. And this all leads up to a big confrontation where the humans that slew the dragon and the dwarves end up banding together to fight off the goblins, again, tying back to the previous parts of the story, that came to raid the town. And so I feel like everything comes together. Things that happened before are pertinent to the future. Everything feels like it's a living, breathing world. And that's something you have to incorporate in storytelling, where you feel that anything could happen, but if it happens, it's kind of foreshadowed. And that you're like, wow, oh yeah, I remember the goblins. We hated those guys. And oh, we could see that they're a real threat because they really put the main characters into turmoil. So bringing back the goblins for the finale was great. And there's also a huge spoiler, but Thorin dies. The person with the most to gain from this ends up perishing in this final battle. He's been there from the very beginning of the story, and I feel like that adds a lot of weight to an otherwise very joyous story. No one actually dies despite all the big issues and troubles that they've happened and had throughout the journey. And so it adds this nice touch of you feeling like the emotions at the end of the book. And I just think it's like the perfect little touch for a kid's book. You don't want too much death, but also for an adult, you want there to be weight to the decisions that are made and to the characters. So that's what I really liked about this book. I feel like it had a little bit of everything. It tied everything together. Every character and group that you encounter through this book ends up having something to do with the finale and affects how the story progresses. There's no filler. Even the side quest, the B plot with Gollum, is heavily pertinent because the ring is crucial in a lot of the stuff that happens later on. Welcome to part 3, the magic system. This is a soft magic system with a lot of mysticism and fantastical, but not overpowered kind of magic. And I really like that because you're having to be creative with how you use it in order to have these powerful effects. But to everyone else, they don't understand how it happens. To them, it's something that can only be done by a select few. And that's what adds this allowance for you to be creative with it, because no one is expecting it. The people who can use magic are few in the story, but you've got Gandalf the wizard, you got the elves who have their own specific type of magic, which I really like. It ties the magic of the world in with a specific species that they specialize in. You could tell that they're magical, but not the same type of magical as Gandalf. And then there's the ring, which adds in this third type of magic, this artifact that lets you know that magic can be imbued in items. And that makes your imagination race with even more things. What else could there be magic with? Is that standard? Is it rare? What kind of magical attributes can be in everyday items? And that just adds so much mystery to everything you pick up, everything you interact with could have a hidden aspect to it. And I really, really like that. I feel that magic is a huge aspect for childhood imagination. When you're a child, you don't know what's feasible, what's possible. You don't know about physics. To you, magic is much closer to reality than an adult. And I like the mysticism of magic because of that. I think hard magic systems rely heavily on someone being intellectual or being educated to understand how these concepts work. And a great author can make it very easy for you to understand, but it kind of breaks the flow of this pure imagination that I had as a kid. And so these types of books really resonated with me, and I really wish I read it growing up. Welcome to part 4, the writing style. We are in third person omniscient through the entire book, and I feel like this style of storytelling is really effective for a grand adventure kind of plot line. It allows you to get through a lot of awesome key events, these big pivotal moments, without having to dive into every single person's emotions and feelings and making everything feel like it's from a singular person's perspective. You're able to account for a lot of things, explain all the intricacies of what's going on in the world, and you're not limited to a single perspective. And I think that's perfect for a book that is trying to show you this brand new, magical, mystical world. I really liked that it had just a loose bit of this personal character touch with Bobo Baggins and a lot of the side characters, but it wasn't to the degree of first person where you're feeling like you are that character. I feel like I'm listening to a story, an adventure that's happening to someone. And these days, a lot of books are from the first person. A lot of people want to feel themselves in the shoes of the main character. But for these fantasy novels, I think you should really consider how you want to tell your story and how you want your audience to perceive that story, because it can have an effect on the perspective you take. Finally, part 5, the outro. I really liked this book. I would very much recommend it, and I want to just say that it's a short read. It's only like 280 pages, but it's in the small book. I really enjoyed this style as well, this little miniature version, because I could carry around while I was traveling. And I feel that most people would enjoy this book if they like fantasy. Even if you don't, I think it's unique enough that you should give it a read to kind of broaden your writing style perspective. I also wanted to give a shout out to Bookleo. She has a lot of great videos about books and book recommendations. It made me realize that a video just in this narrative style, super casual, not edited or extremely complex deep dive, can be successful and could be something enjoyable to watch. Also, I want to give a shout out to Jenny Nicholson. I know it's completely not related to this, but I recommend you check her out. Check both of them out, really. But Jenny Nicholson does a lot of great deep dives, and how she breaks up her story plots, I think, really helped me decide how I wanted to do this review. It helps break up what I'm thinking and how I'm feeling into these different sections, so it's easier to consume and easier to write, so I'm not just overwhelmed by all the stuff I want to talk about. Yeah, and I'll continue this. I'll give out shout outs to whoever inspires me in the moment. Shout out to J.R.R Tolkien and the book that he wrote. And thanks so much for coming on this book review with me. If you liked this video, please comment down below and let me know that you want to see more, because I really enjoyed doing this and I hope to do more in the future. Talk to you later. Bye. Before I end this video, I want to thank my girlfriend for buying me this book and give her a shout out for having a really good recommendation. The Hobbit was great.